Jai Swaminarayan, and welcome to the BAPS Campus podcast series. Our host for today's episode is Gajal Ben, who recently graduated with a degree in graphic design from Coventry University. Joining Gajal Ben is Reema Ben, who graduated from the University of East London and currently works as a senior graphics designer. With the aid of her extensive knowledge in the field, we will explore the rise of graphic design and what it takes to successfully establish yourself in the industry.
Yes, everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast. We are joined today by Reema Ben. So, Reema Ben, my first question to you is, when did you first become intrigued by graphic design, and how did this lead you to wanting to pursue it professionally?
Yes, man. For me, I've always been interested from when I can remember in art and being creative. In school, when you do D&T and things like that, I really enjoyed it, and I always knew that this is something that I love doing and I really want to do it. So for GCSEs, I did art and I did D&T as well. But obviously then I didn't really know what it would entail and where it would lead me. So I started looking into sort of after my GCSEs what I could do for A-levels. Back then there wasn't really that much choice and that much out there. So I did art and I did graphic design for A-levels as well, and I did media and marketing as well. So it kind of encompassed all the creative aspects. But I also did maths because I just thought, actually, if this is not something I want to do, like I could do something with maths, because I really enjoyed maths. And it's strange because you do use it in the creative industry a lot. So that was something that was my fallback. And I just thought, actually, in case I need it, I'll do maths as well. So then I realized that I could actually do graphic design at university, and there wasn't many universities doing it back then. And this was over 10 years ago. So I started looking into what I could do and how I could get there. And I thought graphic design was probably the broadest subject I could choose, because it entails a lot. So that would then lead me to something that I really wanted to do. And I've never really looked back, because I've always been interested in art. And, all my school projects, I remember I used to do like the most fantastic title page before I even did anything else. So I always knew that it was something that I, really wanted to go and into. So yeah, that's how I got here.
Okay, so we know that graphic design isn't considered a traditional profession. So throughout your career, even when you were a student, what obstacles or stereotypes did you face, and how did you tackle them?
So this comes up a lot. And I think for me, the hardest part was choosing these subjects for A-levels and in the end university, because I think a lot of people in our community, they don't understand what it is, and they don't really know like what kind of career path it can lead you down. So I think that was really difficult, like just to explain to my parents, like they'd never heard of graphics, and for most people, they choose subjects like economics, medicine, accounting, those kind of academic careers. And for me, I just knew that it's not something I wanted to pursue. And so for me, it was more just educating my parents, like what it meant for me, and what kind of careers I could get out of it, what kind of jobs I could find, and the fact that I'm not just going to be an artist who doesn't make any money. And I think their concern was really for my future. So I think that the hardest thing is to just educate those around you so they understand what you're going to be doing. Back over 10 years ago, university was really the only option. Like even now, like you get diplomas and you get all these other options, but back then, even in the creative industry, if you didn't have a degree, it was really difficult to kind of stand on your 2 feet, which doesn't mean that you can't get to where you need to go, but I think it just made it harder. Whereas I feel like now there are so many more options, and degrees are not as highly sought after as other ways of getting work in the creative industry. I think options have broadened up a lot. So I think if anyone looking right now thinks, oh, university is not for me, it's quite expensive, I don't know if I could do it, the best way would be to probably find a company who does do a diploma or does do kind of work experience on the job or something like that, where they can train you up and then you can do what you want to do. I know some friends who have started working at a printer's or a print shop, and they just worked their way in, they started doing creative designs as well as doing their day job, and it just meant that they had got the experience and then they just worked their way up. And that's actually totally acceptable in the creative industry. So I think now there are so many more options, and it's not just about sort of going to university, getting a degree, and then finding a job. And I think one of the things that really helps is having a really good portfolio. Like since I've left university, I don't think anybody has ever asked to see my degree, or they've never even asked me what I've got. Like, I've obviously got it on my CV. It doesn't even say what I got at university. I've just put down the university I went to, and no one in an interview has ever asked me like what I got at university, because in the creative industry, it's not really valid. It's more about your experience, about your portfolio, about your personality. And I think a lot of places look for if you'd fit in with the rest of the team, because you have to work closely with other designers. So I think that really shows, and your initiative, I guess, on how much you want the job and how much you're willing to learn. So I think that really shines through. Not really having a degree. I mean, it's great to have a degree because you learn so much, but if that's not for you, then it's not the end of the world, and there is ways you can get to where you want to.
So for the people who think that university is probably not the best option for them, do you think graphic design is something that you can self-teach yourself, or do you think you need to like go somewhere to get that experience?
It's definitely something you can learn yourself. There are so many options and ways you can do this. And I can just give you some examples of like how you can start off. Like, there are so many tutorials on YouTube which are absolutely free. Like, you don't have to pay for any of them. You might need the software, but if you think, oh, I want to try this out, but I'm not quite sure, you can even just download your 1 month free trial and then have a go at it. Try and learn it. And if you think, oh, actually, I don't know if I get this, or I'm not really sure, or I don't want to progress, then at least you've not wasted your money. So you've got your 1 month free trial. Other things you can do is you can get work experience. And even if it's 2 weeks and you're not being paid, or you are being paid, but at the end of the day, it's that experience. Like, you might find that actually, oh my God, I love to do this, and I've learned like how the creative world works. Because I think sometimes you don't really know what the job entails unless you start working and get that experience. I think at university, which is what I found, that when you've learned all this stuff and you have your ideal job in your mind, you actually go out into the working world and realize it doesn't work like that. Like, which is with any industry, it's not just the creative industry. And I think it really hits you like, oh, I didn't realize this is what it was. And you might even find that you might want to change what you want to do because you didn't realize. So probably just to get as much experience as you can, and always learn new things. Like, it costs nothing to learn something new. Like now, like, back 10, 15 years ago, YouTube, there wasn't so many videos on YouTube. There wasn't, I guess, free things that were readily available. Whereas now, I think a lot of people have realized that there's so much more opportunity to learn new things. So there's lots of videos that you can watch, tutorials. Other designers might inspire you. So just see what they're doing, have a look at what's out there. You can go to talks and listen to how other creatives have got to where they want to go, and always be learning. Like, I remember when I started college, and I really didn't know much about the industry. So what I used to do is anything that I learned or that I saw around me, I used to then go home, either make a note of it, or I didn't have a mobile phone back then, so I had to go home, make a note of it, or write it in my book. But now you can just make a note of it on your phone. As soon as you see something, you can make a note of it. Like, if you see an ad and you think, oh, that's pretty cool, I want to know more about that, you can just have a look. And you can, if there's something that you think, oh, that doesn't look right, you can just recreate it yourself. You can sketch it, you can draw it, you can get free. There's lots of free softwares out there that they're not the same as the Adobe Suite, but they are very similar. So you can then download those free softwares and try creating things that you want to create. It might not be perfect, and it might not be exactly what you're thinking it would turn out like, but it will put your ideas down on paper, and you might come back to it one day and it might strike another idea, or then and you might know the software that you wanted to then, and you might just think, oh, actually I can redo this. And so always be learning. And I think that's one of the main things. Like you can never stop learning, and there's so many different avenues in graphic design. Like I started off in publishing and I loved publishing, and it was 10 years ago it was probably easier to get a job in publishing than it is now, because everything's going digital. So I always was like, oh, this is what I want to do. But then I even within my role changed, and I had to learn how to do digital books. So I think there's always space to learn, so always be learning. I think that's my main tip.
You just touched upon this, that graphic design is a huge umbrella and there are so many different areas that people can specialize in. So could you tell us a bit more about the different areas, and how did you choose the right one for you?
Yeah, there are so many things in graphic design, and a lot of them you wouldn't even think that are part of graphic design. But you can go into illustration, motion graphics, web design, UX, UI, motion, animation, print. There are just so many vast subjects that you can choose from. And I think for me, university really helped me narrow down what I wanted to do, because I initially thought I wanted to go into advertising because it seemed glamorous and it was like, oh my God, everyone will see my ads, and it was great. And I actually realized, like when I was there, that it's not for me. It's very ruthless, to work in these high-end agencies. It's very cutthroat, and that's not my personality. And I actually realized that wasn't for me. And I did quite a few work experiences, and one of them was in a publishing company. And I always really enjoyed sort of making magazines and doing prints and stuff. And I just realized that actually this is probably one of the roles that I really, really enjoy doing. So if it wasn't really for work experience, I don't think I would have found where I wanted to be until probably a lot later. It just really helped me. But the other thing is, like, even if you find a job that you really enjoy, there's always room for change. You might start off doing motion and you might realize that, oh, actually I want to learn something different, and you might then go into web design and you might realize that you really, really love it even more. So I think there's a lot of fluidity in graphic design, and that's really great because you can always be creating different things. And even at the moment, so I work in an in-house studio, and that means that there is a big team. It's one of the biggest teams I've worked in, and everyone has a specific role, but actually we help each other out and we kind of chip in. So we have a photographer, and all she does is photography, but I have a few times helped him set up photo shoots and gone with him. We even recently did a film and a video, and it was like a training video. So there's always room to move around in graphic design depending on where you work. And I think so you shouldn't really be fixed on, okay, this is what I'm going to do and this is all perfect, because there's always learning. And I did mention that before, but it's really important, because I think you might get to a stage in your career where you're like, oh, this is what I've always wanted to do, but now what? I don't know where to go from here. And even you might have not considered management or anything like that, but you always have to learn new skills for that kind of thing. So I think there's always so many areas and it's good to explore them. And I think one of the ways which really helped me is doing Seva in Mandir. Like I'd never done video before at work. And because I do AV Seva, I was like, well, I've learned how to do video and I know a little bit of editing, and that actually helped me in my job, because when they said, oh, we need to get in someone to do this, and I was like, oh, actually I can do that, I know how to do sound, and it just gives you more opportunities. So I think when people then look at you and be like, oh, you can do a lot more than just make a poster, which is great, and it's great career progression as well for you. So there's so many ways that your Seva and Mandir can help you.
This leads us nicely on to my next question. How has satsang given you opportunities to expand your portfolio and increase your overall experience? And how has your Seva helped you get the professional role that you have today?
So Mandir and Seva and satsang as a whole has really, really immensely helped me to get to where I am today. If it wasn't for the opportunities that I got in Mandir, I probably wouldn't be here and in a role that I love doing. Like I remember when I was a Kishori, I used to create posters and things for events that we were doing. I would then be like, oh, maybe we could design a t-shirt. I mean, I don't do apparel or clothing now, but for me, that was an opportunity to learn and, just an opportunity to put something in my portfolio. Like when you first, either come out of university or if you're thinking about just getting a job, you have nothing. It's like a blank sheet of paper and you're like, what can I put on my portfolio? And I think Seva and all the opportunities that we get in Monday really, really help with that. So any opportunity I think that you can get to either do a poster or anything creative for satsang really, really helps you. Like I remember we used to have goshtis and I used to say, oh, I'll just do a little poster for that, because then it gave me the opportunity to be creative and put something together. You don't need a poster for goshti. It's not necessary. You can just have a bit of text, but just finding things where you think, actually, I can do that, like creating invites or, creating for an event, you just create a little bookmark or a gift or something. Even little things like that, I think really, really help you, especially when you're trying to build a portfolio. And I guess find where you belong as well, because all the designers and creators have their own style, and you don't really know what your style is until you then start creating work. So I think finding a reason to create something always helps. Not only the skills that I learned doing Seva and graphics in Monday, but also personal skills like the communication, generally the way you talk to people, the confidence that you get from doing speeches and sabhas in Monday, all of those things really, really like as a whole come together. So with all the seva and the opportunities that you get in Mandir and, everything that comes along, I mean, in a lot of my interviews, I've always been asked about volunteering and about what I do and why I do it. And it just shows people that not only are you enthusiastic and you really, really want to use your creativeness to get where you are, but also it just shows that you're reliable, that you want to give back. And, especially in this day and age, I think a lot of people look for all-rounder person, and that's what Mandir and Satsang give you. They give you that all-roundedness. Even communication, like we find that because of Satsang and because of Mandir, we talk to different generations, and the way we communicate to people and the respect. And I think that shows off. Like people always notice that, and people always notice like your personality, and it even shines through in an interview, even when you're nervous. I think people see beyond the nervousness and think, actually no, like in the creative industry, a lot of the time they always look for people who fit in with the rest of the team. And I think when you have satsang and all those skills that you build, going to sabhas and talking to people, doing seva, it really shows off. And I think so satsang is huge. Like no matter what seva you get, even if it's like decoration or making something, cutting or anything that you get, like always take the opportunity to do as much as you can, because everything builds up and it does get you where you need to be.
Thank you, Reema Ben. So my next question is that because of COVID and the pandemic, a lot of industries have been affected. So how has the pandemic affected the design industry, and how do you think it will shape the future?
That's a really good question. Personally, for me, so where I work, we're in retail stores a lot, and previous to the pandemic, 80% of sales was in the retail sector, and 20% was online. And I mean, we were at the time when we went into lockdown, we were actually working on a new app. We were just launching it just to increase the sales online. But because of the pandemic, it really pushed a lot of our work online and to be digital. So instead of doing sort of magazines and flyers and things for the retail, we then moved a lot of our resources online, and we were then doing a lot of social media ads for Snapchat and stories, for Instagram, things like that, where we never really explored very much before. But because everything was online, even though essential retail was open, it did really affect sales, because a lot of people were not going out. They just wanted to stay at home, or, like they'd only go out for a walk and they did online shopping. So that was really hard, like initially, to make that change. But I think actually, the world is moving in that direction even before the pandemic. And it actually I think it just pushed us as a company to actually move quicker than we wanted to. But it's been a really good change. Like, I think now our sales are sort of probably 50% retail, 50% online. But it just means that we've really pushed on the things that we weren't doing before. And my role personally, it's meant that we are not producing as much stuff for print, and more stuff for digital, but we're doing more like web banners and things like that. And it just means that we've had to use different skills, because there are so many rules and restrictions, or even on Facebook for banners and things, that we've had to kind of sort of learn on the job. But in a world that's going very digital and moving very fast paced now, I think it does make you realize that even the creative industry is forever changing. And even doesn't matter what sector you're in, like you always have to think about the digital. So like just during the first lockdown, I was creating some posters for a partnership that we had. And it was actually digital screen posters. They were not going to be like, they were billboards, but they were digital screen billboards and posters. And it just made me realize that actually even things that would have previously been printed, even before the pandemic, now a lot of, even the bus stands are digital, they're all screens. So it's just like a different way of working and a different mindset. And I get, essentially, you're doing the same thing, but it's just a different way of thinking that you kind of have to come across. So, I mean, that can happen in any industry. But yeah, I think when you're creative, I think you really need to kind of look out there and just make sure that you're on top of like all the technical aspects of your job as well.
And lastly, what advice would you give to our younger Gishors and Gishoris who are considering a career in graphics design? And do you have any tips or advice on portfolio as well, and what you can include?
My main advice, which is I've covered a little bit, is that always be thinking about creative. Like, I'll give you an example. I sometimes, when I watch a film and the credits roll at the end, I actually watch them to the end, because I just want to see, it sounds really, really geeky, but I just want to see the fonts they've used. Like if the music is timed when the credits roll, and just silly things like that, like what colors they've used and the backgrounds, and things like that. I just think, I mean, people probably think, oh, just switch it off, but actually that is creative. Like a designer has sat there and thought about all those things. So it doesn't matter what you see, and even if it's not your industry, like sometimes, like I look at fashion, it's got nothing to do with my role, but you can just see what colors are out there, like just to refresh things, and always take inspiration from other people, but don't ever copy other people's work. Like, find your own creative style, and be different, and always use people as an inspiration, just to see what's there and what can be done, but always find your own style. And I think that usually stands out. So when you put your own work in your portfolio, it's going to be different, but that's what people are looking for, and that's what, when someone hires you, they're looking for someone to bring something different to the team. And that leads me on to, in your portfolio, just have as much variety as you can. And something that I've learned over the years is never just have the same portfolio for every single job that you apply for. You read the job description, see the skills that you will need for that job, and then tailor your portfolio to that job role. There's no point having an animation in your portfolio if all you're going to be doing is creating magazines and posters. Like, yeah, they want to see a different skill, but really all they're looking for is that you've ticked all the right boxes for that job. And don't put too much in there. Like, having 50 pages, people are going to look at the first 5 maybe, and then just ignore the rest. So have your best work be really selective, and be ruthless, very ruthless. And what helps me is have other creatives. They might be the same level as you, they might be studying, it doesn't matter, like they might be in a different creative industry, but just have someone else creative look at your portfolio. They will always spot things that you've missed. And even not just for your portfolio, but when you're working, always have someone double check like what you've created, because people see things that you don't see. So that's quite important. And one of the main things that I look for when I'm hiring is that you don't have a Word CV, because if you're a creative, you need to create your CV as well. It's not just about creating your portfolio, it's about creating everything that you send to your employer. So always, like even your cover letter, if you've got some, a little border or a header on your CV and your portfolio, put it on your cover letter as well. It just shows that that extra step, you've thought about that and that extra step ahead, and you've not just opened up a Word doc and typed a few words in, and it shows that you're using your initiative as well. I mean, when I hire, the first thing I do is I look at the CV. If it doesn't look very nice, I generally skim it quicker than I skim other things. So I think like that's one of the most important things. And I know a lot of agencies ask you for a Word format. I always say to them, I only have a PDF, and they usually accept it. So don't just, they've asked for a Word document, so I'm going to send them a Word. Just push back a little bit, because the person that it's going to on the other side, who's going to employ you, really wants to see that you've put your 100% creative skills into what you're sending them as well. And keep it really short. Like your CV should be no longer than one A4 side. Like anything longer than that, in all honesty, creatives don't want to look at, because they don't want to read a whole lot of words. They want to see that you've put creative effort into it. Obviously, have all the main important bits. Make sure all your work experience is on there, and references is really important, and that kind of thing. Or have all the main bits on it, but just keep it as short. And instead of writing paragraphs, just put bullet points. I mean, that might not only apply to creative industry, it might apply to a lot of other industries, but it really helps in the creative industry, because they just want a glimpse of you, because then they're going to look at your portfolio and then really decide like, okay, this work person is worth bringing in because their portfolio is outstanding, or they've done something a little bit different. So I think those are the kind of things. And like, don't be afraid to put in extra things. Like you might have done something as a personal project, so you might have designed yourself a logo, or you might have done a friend's wedding invite and all of their collateral just as a hobby. But if you think it's amazing and you think that people really need to see it, don't be afraid to put your personal things in there, because it just shows that you can do a lot of variety of work, and you've done this in your own time. So it really will excel all the other work experience and other things that you've done. And just this is the main tip, just get as much work experience as you can. Like even if like in summer you go to 2 places or 3 places if you can. A lot of places won't, they might not want you for a whole summer, they might just want you for 2 weeks. But don't be put off by that. Just get as much experience as you can. It just shows initiative and that you're really willing to be in the industry.
Right, thank you so much, Reema, for joining us this week. And thank you for educating us and giving us advice and tips on the design industry. Just on there.
Thank you for joining this week's BAPS Campus podcast. We hope you were able to take something meaningful from this discussion. If you have any questions or feedback, then please do not hesitate to contact the team on campus@uk.baps.org. Jai Swaminarayan.